was awesome, man. Dude, I appreciate you more than you know.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're the kind of people that I want on this show, man. You know what we do? It's called Conversation with the CEO. Another edition of none other than Conversation with the CEO. I'm always excited. Let me just say this before I even introduce this guy, because, it's amazing when you step out on faith and just do something that you're supposed to do. It'll introduce you to some wonderful people. Now, how I met him is he purchased my audiobook online of Trading IMO. You're familiar with that. He purchased it. Reached out to me after listening to it, like I say in the book, and then we basically became good friends after that. So I'm excited of how we're introduced. But he's a photographer out in Los Angeles. He's from Canada. But let me just say this. He's really, really good. Let me tell you something. You see his work, it is, I don't even, like, you want to work with him. I'm just going to say that. If you've never worked with him, you want to work with him. There's a shot, and I'm going to bring this up a little later, that I love of Lamar Odom's, and I didn't even know he was the photographer of that great picture. So let's introduce Ryan West, the CEO of Ryan West Photos. What's going on, man?
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the kind words. Definitely hiring you to introduce me on all my photo shoots. Pleasure to be here, and yeah, thanks so much. And how you been? How's the family? I know you got two little ones.
Yeah, the family's doing great, man. We're just kind of just enjoying each other, and I'm trying to spend more time with my kids as much as possible. We try to go somewhere as much as we can. You know how it is, man. I spent a lot of my years, and I was telling somebody this the other day, just chasing after my goals in radio. You and I have that in common. You were a DJ, a radio personality, just like myself. And during that time, when you're trying to be a successful DJ, you really do have to grind the pavement for people to really listen to you. It's not just turn the mic on. You got to go out and meet people, shake hands, kiss babies. And I remember that, and it took away from me being as close to family as I should have been. But as I'm getting older now, I spend a lot more time with the family.
Right. Nice. Yeah, that's actually how I think, initially connected. I can't remember what cruise you were part of, but I know we were Facebook friends for a long time. Yeah. And then I would always see your posts that were, very well done and to the point, about different stock picks and different things. That's what made me check out the book. I was like, man, this guy, because there's a lot of talkers out there, obviously, in any business. So I kept seeing it. I'm like, man, okay. And then I would, on a couple of them, I did check to see, like, how did that pick pan out? I'm like, okay, this guy knows what's up. So that's what made me, because as well, before the producing and the DJing, I worked in finance for like 10 years, right? So I knew a little bit about investments and things of that nature. And so when I read your book, I was like, okay, it was a totally different take. I won't give it away or anything, but for people that are sitting on the fence, I mean, it's a low cost. I would just say, just do it, because it's a different approach, something I had never really thought about. It's just a different thing that you could try.
Well, I really appreciate you even saying it about the book, man. You come from finance, so you know it a lot better than me. When I got into trading, man, I'm not a person that likes, bars, graphs, and lines. So I wasn't going to learn that way. So, but I really did want to trade, and I wanted to learn how to invest and find myself in a simplistic way, make money. And some kind of way it just worked out. And I appreciate that, because, a lot of people have been benefiting from it. And, I'm getting emails all the time about, like, man, I'm so glad I got your book, man. It's like, I never looked at it like this. And I think sometimes when you don't know something and you try to learn it, you get a different perspective. That's all.
Yeah.
And I just think that's what that is. So let's talk about your work, man. First of all, I'm going to pause right now. Let's just look at his work. Wow. Okay, let's get into it. You are a CEO of your own company, and you do this full time. Am I right?
I do it full time. Yeah.
How do you do it? How do you do it, man? How do you do it?
I think, to be honest, there was times when I jumped into photography a little bit later in life, and I always thought, man, I wish I would have started sooner. But then at the same time, upon reflection, I feel like maybe the skills that I had learned I have a business degree. I worked in finance, right? And so in that world, I learned about project management, managing a team, how to budget, working with numbers, how to market. Because in the role I was in the strategic planning area. We had our fingers kind of in all the different areas of the company. And so for me, I was working with like the CEO to my boss, who was the VP of strategy, to branch managers, to customers, or members, we would call them. So it gave me like a kind of a worldly perspective of a business, from all angles, even working with the board of directors. So I think that kind of helps, and just even service. There was one point in my career where I was tasked with how can we improve our service, because I think we were a top 50 company, and eventually we moved up to one of the top 10 companies in all of Canada to work for, which was pretty amazing. And so one of the things I was tasked with was to learn about, the experience, right? And so I had read a couple books. Disneyland was a big one at the time. And I remember I flew down to California and I went to Disneyland and I went to Universal Studios. And I remember walking into Disneyland and it's like, hello, welcome, greeting you with a smile, like, oh, it's this much, and then they would point. They would never point with one finger, because in some cultures that's considered rude. They would always point with two. So you're parking down that way, sir. Then I turn the corner. There's another person parking. Turn this way. I turn. There's another guy. One last, here's your spot. I'm like, wow, they parked me right into my spot. Amazing. And then you're on the grounds. It's all clean. They don't break the fantasy. So all the employee doors, they're all hidden, in different areas inside of like a tree or behind here. It's all hidden. And, they call themselves, I think like actors or characters or something like that. And members are guests. So it's just a very interesting mindset. Then I went to Universal, dude. Garbage on the drive-in as I'm pulling in. This is 10 years, this is probably like 10, 15 years ago. It's changed now. But back then, it was like dirty. You guys like, here's your money. Yeah, park somewhere down that way. And, just totally different experience. And so it's stuff like that. So for me, I always say I'm white glove service, so you work with me, there's nothing you need to worry about. Because one, I understand the marketing. So some of the questions I'll ask right away are, tell me about your client. What are 3 key words that describe your client? And some of these businesses are like, wow, I've never had anyone really ask me that before. And some of them have the answer and some of them don't even have the answer. And so I'm helping them a little bit on the marketing side, which is beyond what a typical photographer might do. So I'm really trying to get to know who's buying your stuff. What do they look like? Let's build the mood board and the direction of the shoot so that we can, satisfy that, right? Because really, ultimately, using the images to sell something, right? In a way, right?
Yeah.
It all just kind of came together, luckily,
Let me ask you this, man. Man, your stuff is so phenomenal, man. It's almost like, how did you get an eye like that, man? How do you get to a point where, they could put your stuff on anything, on any level, any national scale, and you compete with the best of them?
Trying. I think I've maybe always was interested and always had an eye. So even when I was a kid, my parents gave me a film camera and I used to just experiment. Back then, there was no Photoshop. So like to do a double exposure, you'd have to I'd take that first shot and I'd make a note somewhere, like me sitting on the couch on the left side. So then and I'd finish my roll, then I'd rewind it, go back to that first frame. And then I would put myself on the other side of the couch and then take another shot. And that's how you would get like a double exposure of me, 2 of me sitting on a couch. Super easy now these days in the age of digital. But back then you'd have to have a little bit of a thought about it, right? So I was always experimental, I always had that like kind of
let me ask you
for visuals.
Let me ask you this then, that you're bringing up that point with how you had to do things in the past, right? How much has that helped you be better today? Sometimes they say technology changes things, makes it better, but then sometimes they say it makes it worse. I mean, what would you say?
I mean, there's no right or wrong, to be honest. I think there is something a bit, I think sometimes you hear artists talk about like the magic of something, so whether it was like vinyl or, recording, tracks onto like a 2-inch tape in the studio or photography using film, there is that bit of magic because it's not quite like perfect. There's an interpretation. It's the same thing. These days, everything is very like clinical, like a sampler. If you're sampling an old record and you're making a new record out of it, you go into the studio, it's all like crystal clear digital audio. Everything is crystal clear. That's why it kind of lacks a bit of that soul that it might have had using like analog instruments, and same thing with digital cameras, right? It can be very clinical, and that's not what I want. I don't want like a clinical, almost like a medical textbook type interpretation of what I'm shooting. I want some magic in there. So I do use a combination of digital and film, and I have my own tricks to kind of soften up digital. And just try and add some magic. But yeah, I mean, these days the magic is kind of gone out of things, right? Any kid can go and download, like Fruity Loops or whatever, Logic or whatever they're using today off a laptop and start creating music. So on one hand, that's great because the barrier to entry is low. So a lot of people that could be the next, genius of music might not have had access because of, the cost to enter. But now it's so easy, right? So on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, everybody's doing it. Everybody's a DJ / producer / photographer, / whatever, right? So the market gets flooded, but that's the key is how do you stand out in the market,
Yeah, you seem to do that, man. So how do you get a lot of your business? How do people contact you? Now, in my opinion, I could be so wrong. You just seem like, man, you're going to work with the best of the best, because you seem to already have a good client tail because they're familiar with you, Tell me how how do you get out there,
these
man?
days it's a little bit easier, but yeah, when I first came to LA like 6-7 years ago, I didn't know anybody here. So I literally would just pick up the phone and email every day. That's all I did. I just reached out to every single person I could. Almost like, you ever see Yes Man or whatever with Jim Carrey? Just does yes to everything.
Yeah. Sure. Why not? That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love that.
That's what I would do. Just, even if it was a job I didn't necessarily want, I thought, okay, I would still do it to the best of my ability, but I would just go out there and meet people and just try and do as many things as I could, because I figured that way I would expand out. And plus, LA is such a hub. There's a thing called proximity effect in marketing, where it's, just if you put yourself in that area, good things will happen, so to speak. So when I was back home in Vancouver, it's a great city, but it's a small market. Nothing was really going to happen for me, right? And so I forget, it was a book I read. I forget who it was, but like a business mogul was talking about the proximity effect. You got to go where the action's at. So I think the example in that book was like music, right? Like hip hop. He's like, if you want to be in those markets, you got to be in New York, LA, Atlanta, or Miami. Those are the main markets. You put yourself in there, you're bound to, start making those connections. And so that's what it was for me when I came to LA. Right off the bat, I made a connection with a denim company, and I started shooting their campaigns for them. And through that, I met some other people, and then it just kind of expanded. And you go out and you network, and it can be a bit exhausting, right? But yeah, you have to go out, you have to meet people. So it was originally, to answer your question, it was a little bit hard, but now it's getting easier. Now I have an agent, so that helps. 2, there's Instagram and stuff, so I definitely try to promote as much as I can on there. 3, I do just direct marketing emails. And then 4, word of mouth.
So what would you say to someone who feel they have the talent to do photography and they want to run their own business similar to yourself? What would be your best advice to them in terms of what they should actually do?
In terms of what, getting clients, or how to run a business?
Just to run a business like yours and be successful. There's some young person right now, they're listening to you and they're going, man, I want to do that. Right.
Right.
I want to be like him. I want to be able to look. LA is the spot. You're in LA. Right. And not only you're in LA, you're someone with clients in LA. So that separates you. How can I get in that spot? Is what the big question. What do I need to do?
It's funny because I've asked other photographers that are older, like, what would you do if you were first starting out? Because I think it's such a great question. And it's sadly, I would say 9 out of 10 of them say, man, I wouldn't do it. It's so competitive and it's such a grind. And, kind of rates are coming down, and, supply of photographers is ever expanding. But that's the same in any business. I think in any business, there's always like a commodity factor to it, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you're like a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist, I think there's so many jobs where it gets a bit commoditized. So that's where you have to really separate yourself out. So I think it can still be done. I mean, I've had a couple of months where I made pretty much triple what I was making back in my finance days. And it wasn't like that. When I first came to LA, I was making nothing, right? Didn't know anybody, had no clients. And so that's, it's those kind of goals. Like I have certain goals written out for myself that I wanted to achieve. And even before moving to LA, I had I just wrote it out. It wasn't necessarily a vision board, but I had like a whiteboard. I wrote out kind of how I envisioned everything, like it was kind of crazy, like what my life would look like where I would be, like the view, kind of what I would be doing, how I'd be making money. And, I would say like probably I'm at 80% of what I had written out. It was like 5 years ago. I remember writing it all out. So whether that works or not, I don't know. But I think, it's just being mindful of it. It's in your mind that you're bound to just like start taking action that aligns with your goals, And so if I was a young guy, like you were saying, man, you got to put in the work. There's no way around, unless you are like a relative of somebody famous, or, you have a relative that works in the business somehow to put you on, maybe on the advertising side, you're going to have to work. Like I didn't know anybody. I don't have any connections like that when I came here. So it's just meeting people and trying to be, just trying to be a good person. I always try to add value. I always try to add value, and I always try to offer white glove service for what I do, right?
Okay.
For what I do.
Man, I love talking to you, man. We're going to do this again, man, because you got so much information. Now, a lot of this comes up, and when I'm interviewing a lot of CEOs, they talk about meeting. Like you just said that word again, meeting. Right. Meeting people, right? How do you meet people in 2021, 2022?
Yeah, I mean, in LA it's funny enough because like from Vancouver, I moved to New York for about a year. And then from New York, I moved out here. And honestly, I found it way easier to meet people in New York, and that people were a lot more friendlier and more inclined to like invite you out to places. Whereas LA, it could be a little bit more cliquey. But I'm generalizing, obviously. But I mean, how do you meet people just in general in life, right? It's just, I mean, let's say you were a photographer and you're trying to meet people and you didn't know anyone. You could go, there's, I think, photography meetups. You could go to that. You could go to like camera stores. You could start reaching out to models, or, depends on what genre you're in. But let's say you were like me, where you shoot fashion and celebrity. Obviously, you can't just call up celebrities and, go shoot off the bat like that. But you could definitely, reach out to models, reach out to, if you're really starting out just from scratch, you could probably go into Model Mayhem or post a Craigslist post. And then if you're a step above that, you could actually reach out to modeling agencies, show them your book and say, hey, I'm looking for new faces, which is basically like, new girls to the agency that need a portfolio. So then, you start meeting them. Hey, cool. Do you have any other friends? And that was actually one thing I used to always ask people. So when I went to New York, same thing. I didn't know anybody there. But whenever I would meet someone or talk to someone on the phone, my closing question was always, hey, by the way, great talking to you. By the way, is there anyone else you think I should talk to? And 9 times out of 10, they'd be like, oh yeah, you know what? You should talk to so-and-so. Here, I'll email intro you in, or, we'll go for coffee next week or something. So that worked quite a bit. I used that closing line like all the time. And I remember I had like a journal, that I was kind of keeping, my notes in. And dude, it was just page after page after page of all these people's names and stuff. And it was pretty effective, So wow. I'd give that a try. Right?
Let me ask you about this. Things are changing, right? There are things that exist now that didn't exist 20 years ago, which I feel impact what you do. For example, NFTs.
Right.
How does that impact you? Because a lot of the NFTs, they come from photography, right? That's the whole point. And it's about owning that original piece of work. How is the NFT going to impact the photography world?
I think it's still yet to be seen. I've definitely seen, I've had some friends that have sold some stuff and sold pretty decent. But it's still a little bit, I don't know, new. I'm not 100% sure, because you don't own the copyright when you buy it. You're just basically buying the first like digital copy of it. And obviously from there it can be copied and blah, blah, blah. But you have like the original, I think, token or whatever it is to prove that yours is the original. So, is there value in that? Perhaps, probably, right? Is it, I think, as, interesting as like a real painting, like a Picasso or something? Probably not. But, there's something there to it. I think that technology is pretty interesting. Just the whole blockchain, and even applying it to the music side, right? How it can, take care of the splits right away and all that stuff. Like the theory and the knowledge behind it, I think is the future for sure. What's that going to look like and who's going to win? I don't know. There's so many tokens and different things out there, right? So I guess time will tell. Is it going to be beta or is it going to be VHS?
Oh, okay. I got you. Listen, you're right. You're right. Man, you listen, let me tell you something. You need to write a book, man. You need to write a book. Number one, you didn't know anybody in Los Angeles and you went there and you were successful. A lot of time people say, you know, they give excuses for why they don't make it. You know what I mean? And you could have used a ton of them and you still made it. You know, what do you say to people like that?
I mean, they're not wrong. It is hard. And I'll be honest with you guys, you know, like, when I came down, I already kind of had that thought that, hey, man, it's a big city. I'm going to be lonely. So what can I do to increase my chances of winning? And so instead of getting and as well, I didn't really know LA. You know, I had been there a few times, but I didn't really know it. It's so big. I didn't know where I wanted to stay. So as opposed to signing up and getting my own place and having to sign a year lease, I looked for somebody that was renting out like a room, you know? And so I went to like a few different places and it was like garbage, you know, like these young bros from UCLA and that type of stuff. And then I ended up meeting this guy who was an architect. And I opened up the place and I'm like, wow, your place is amazing. It's like this beautiful garden and got this nice, room in there that was for rent. And, you know, he's a little bit older, but he was a super cool guy. And I just felt comfortable right away. And so that was part of my strategy, right? Was to get that room because I knew at the very minimum, I could at least talk to that guy. You know, his name was Don. He was a super nice guy. But yeah, you know, like at least because I knew I was going to get lonely and get a little bit depressed because, you know, I'm leaving my family and friends back home. And yeah, there was some times where just, dude, like how many calls and emails can you make during the day? And then at night, I got nothing to do. And I'm not really the type of guy to go to the club by myself or whatever. Yeah. You know, not that there's anything wrong with that. If you can do that, amazing, right? Because that's how you're going to meet people. But
speaking of, where'd you meet your wife, man? Where'd you meet her?
Man, so okay, I had at the time. So one of my first assistants was this young girl that wanted to get into photography, and so we were taking a break after the shoot, getting something to eat, and we were talking about dating. And I think Tinder had just come out, and I think she was on it, I was on it, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm getting dates. It was actually easy to date out here, but the substance was thin, you know. And she was like, oh, you think you have it bad? Check out what girls have to go through. And she flipped open like, I forget what app it was, but man, it was just like dirty, like guys just, you know, like nonsense. Yeah, just, you know, oh, I want to do this to you, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I was like, wow. And then she's like, actually, I'm having good luck on this new one. It was like Coffee Meets Bagel or something like that. And she's like, is that still around? Coffee Meets Bagel? I couldn't tell you, bro. I dropped it. But it was designed by women from Harvard, right? Mm-hmm. So it was just elevated, and you don't get a ton of matches per se. You only get like a few per day, and it is a little bit more, there's a little bit more depth to it. And so I was like, all right. She was like, yeah, you should try it. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll try it. And she was right. The quality was like pretty good. You know, like these women were like educated about their family. Like it was pretty good quality. I wasn't particularly attracted to like a lot of the girls on there, but eventually, bam, my wife came across, or, you know, my future wife came across, and I was like, wow, she's cute. And I'm like, oh, she has like her bachelor's, she has her master's, she's a, you know, therapist, psychologist, she works with kids, you know, family values. And I was like, oh, I got to meet her. And funny enough, I think I was the first one that popped up when she had signed up. So, and it was funny because we were supposed to meet. I remember it was right around my birthday in December. We were supposed to meet. And then I remember she had text to cancel. Like, hey, I'm so sorry. I have a client issue that came up. And, you know, I don't know her. So I'm like, is this like BS? Right. And at that point, like, I was just kind of playing the numbers game. You know, I was just like, I'm not putting any effort into a lot of it because my experience so far in LA has been kind of thin. So I was like, all right. I was just like, yeah, cool. You know, like, and I'm like, I'll let her reach out. And then I think it was a couple of weeks. And then I think one of her friends was like, hey, what happened to that guy? Like, you know, it seemed like it would be a good fit. And so then she reached back out. We went for, we went for drinks that night. And I used to have back in my single days, I would have a rule. I would like never have a date longer than like 2 hours because I didn't want to stale out, leave them wanting more, just, you know, keep it moving. And dude, I remember at the end of the date, I think the date was like, I think 5 or 6 hours long. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, there's something there, right? Like it was just a great connection. And, yeah, man, longest first date ever, broke my own rule. And that's how I kind of knew there was something special, you know?
Man, you're giving us some great information here today, man. I know everybody's learning from this good stuff. Look, I got to bring it up because I mentioned earlier, Lamar Odom, this picture, man, this beautiful picture of Lamar Odom. That's your work, man. Talk to me about that.
So that was an interesting one. And it looks pretty conceptual and all that. But this is where I think like experience comes into play, you know, because I had that set up in the afternoon. I was shooting him for a magazine, and I think it was supposed to be at 1:00. Meanwhile, I had another shoot with a pretty big, like one of the most prestigious PR firms in LA, doing a favor for them, shooting some portraits of like their VPs. So I forget where I was. I think I was in Beverly Hills or something shooting that. And that was at like 10. So I figured, okay, there's enough time. I'm shooting, I think, 4 people there. I can break down my assistant and I can head over to, I think it was in like Century City or something like that for the other shoot. I'm about midway through the shoot and I get a text from the magazine editor. Hey, Lamar's here early. His flight landed early. They came early. Can you come now? And I was like, I can't come now. I'm in the middle of another shoot, but I will, expedite this and I'll burn down there. Just try and, stall them. And so luckily there's like a little lunch service thing in that other building. So the editor took him for lunch with his publicist. I quickly finished up this shoot. My assistant and I just like threw everything into the bag. Like, let's go. I burned down there. We literally, we park, we go up. We're going in. I'm like, okay, like, Derek, set up, grab that stand. Like literally as I'm about to like set up, he walks in. So I was like, forget it. So we have one light that's just battery powered. You could just kind of hold it like here. I threw on something real quick. I'm like, there, hold it here, do this. I flipped like I did a couple tricks. I used the gel and like I flipped the white balance and did a couple things. And I just bam, bam, I'm like, Lamar, turn this way, bam, that's great. And literally we had like 30 seconds with them because they were ready to go on to something else. And so I was a little, your nerves kick in, of course, but that's just, where I had some tricks in the bag, some, from experience of what I could do. And I just wanted something, I wanted something interesting because I had seen he doesn't really have a lot of, conceptual type photos or just typical street portraits. So I wanted to do something interesting and some moody and dude, it came out. And then I remember I was still a little like, did we get it? Because it was so quick. And that's the thing. Sometimes that's how it is with some of these celebrities, right? And I remember looking through the photos, I'm like, we got it, and then that was good. Yeah.
Man, that's awesome, man. Who's the, like, in terms of pictures that you've taken of, who's the biggest in terms that made you, in your mind, made you super nervous? Like, oh my God, am I really doing a shoot with this person?
I mean, honestly, I don't feel like I have that because I think just from my music days, I met so many people.
Gotcha.
Like Kanye and all these other like big, people in the music business. So I never really got that. And I never come in from like a feeling of less than, because they're just people as well. They've done some cool stuff. Great, but they're not better than anyone else. We're all cut from the same cloth, so I don't really have that mindset,
Okay. I understand, man.
Doesn't mean I don't get nervous or, I don't get butterfly. Like if it's a big shoot, it's not so much about the talent, it's more about the production. Like if it's a big shoot, there's a lot of money involved and a lot of people, of course I want to do my best. So I always feel that like sense of urgency. And usually after like the first shot is done, then I'm like, okay, I can feel my body like relaxed and like, okay, now we're in the groove,
Okay. I got you. Now you talk about reading a lot. What's a book? What books do you recommend right now for someone who, just in general, wants to be a CEO, wants to be an entrepreneur, wants to run their own company, wants to hire people, have people work for them? Like, what books would you recommend?
I mean, there's a lot of general business books. I feel you could probably just Google that and like what are some top business books? I can't really, Good to Great, I remember was one I read back in the day, but for me, I think more just about in terms of self-development, because that'll impact all your areas, relationships with your family and friends, your significant other, employees, your general life. So in terms of self-development is what I can talk best about. And hands down, the best books I've read, one was Maxwell Maltz. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics. It's a weird title, but it is like, it's one of the original self-development books. And so many people borrow from that book if you go in, because I would read a book and look to see the references, right, and like keep going back. He referenced this guy, let me read this guy referenced this guy, and I kind of worked my way back. That's how I came across that book. And to me it was a game changer because it deals with like your mindset and even how you just said, is there anyone that you get nervous from? And it's like no, and part of that is from experience, like I said, on the music side, but part of it is from that book as well, because it's written by a plastic surgeon, right? And the thing was, he would fix people, but they would still have that, oh, my nose is too big, or this is, they would still have that like kind of ghosting effect in their head. And he's like, that's so weird because I fixed them. And so he started to get into psychology and he wrote this book. So Psycho-Cybernetics, weird title, but amazing book. That obviously Think and Grow Rich, which I think most people know about by now. And The Alchemist. When I first moved to LA, I'd heard of The Alchemist. I had never read it, but I remember seeing, I think it was Pharrell talk to Oprah, and Oprah was like, what's your number one book? And
she suggested I read the book The Alchemist, and it changed my whole life.
And I was like, hey, good enough for Pharrell, good enough for me. I'm like, I'm gonna
come on now.
I'm gonna read the book. And then it was just the right time too, because I read the book and it was right when I moved to LA, and it kind of, there's some parallels there. So those are my top 3 books. Like, if you haven't read them, I would highly recommend it.
Man,
Game changers.
Let me ask you this, and I got to ask you, because you're a father like I am, and you love your kids like I do, man. What is it like, man, being a dad, man?
Tired. Not gonna lie. It's I mean, I just have one right now. I got a little guy. He's 1.5. His name's Christian. No,
he's beautiful. He's a beautiful guy too, by the way. Handsome guy.
He's a handsome little fella. He's already done one campaign, so saving up his college money.
Come on.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie. It is tiring and it's taxing and all that stuff, but it is truly amazing. And the amazing things is seeing all those firsts. Like the first time, he speaks, the first time he was able to roll over, the first time he was able to crawl, the first time he was able to walk holding on to something, the first time he was able to walk on his own, and now he's like running all over the place. Right. So
yeah, that's
the exhausting part. He just runs like he's, yeah.
How has it changed you? How has it changed you as a man and as a businessman? How is having your son done? Well, talk to me about that. Because some people, I was watching. I hate to say it. I watch Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. Okay, I can't help it. I like it. It's junk.
I haven't seen it, but okay.
It's junk TV, but I still watch it. So Safari got married, and him and his wife Erica were having a discussion, and he said, I didn't know having kids was this tough. If I had known this, I might not have wanted to do this. He was really questioning, so it makes me just like, how has it impacted you as a businessman / just life in general?
I mean, I think I was, obviously you never know the full extent until you have kids of your own. But I did have some experience because my mom ran a daycare for like 20 plus years. And it was, my room was in the basement and so was the daycare. So, I mean, I had been around kids from babies to, like 10-year-olds or whatever, like pretty much, a big chunk of my life. And so I had already been in that environment, so I'm used to kids and all that stuff running around. And I love kids, I think it's, they're characters. And so, but it does impact you a little differently when it is your own, because of course everything is like magnified, right? If anything happens, of course, like, you're just always on. I think I understand where my mom was coming from. You never stop worrying. Like even when he's here, just playing safely or whatever, you just always, if it goes silent, you're like, why is it so silent? What's he up to? What's he doing? So you never stop worrying. And I get it. Even when I was probably older, like even when you're like 18 and you're going out for the night with your friends, sometimes my mom would still be up. She's like, oh, I just wanted to make sure you got home okay. Like, I was worried. And back then I couldn't understand it, but now I do, right? Like you as a parent, you never stop worrying. So that's how it impacts me. I think, just as like a human being. In terms of my business, it just makes me want to be more concise, like I am like a type A personality. I'm always like 24/7. So I'm trying to, like you were saying, kind of pare that back a little bit. Like sometimes I have to be cognizant of, okay, it's, time to turn it off and focus on the fam or, spend, do a family, family time or whatever. Cause otherwise I will keep working, or I'm very, what's that, autodidact personality, like I love to learn. So like I go down the rabbit hole. I see something, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I Google it, and then that leads me to another search. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Leads me to another search. Or, like just the other day, there was like, I forget what it was now, like a director or someone. I'm like, oh, they did a cool movie. And I'm like, oh, the wardrobe stylist is like this famous Japanese wardrobe stylist. I'm like, oh, I've seen some of the movies that she did some stuff for. I'm like, oh, let's learn about her. And then all the people she worked with. And it's just like, it's exponential, right? But you learn all that stuff and I love it. And then it stays up here, right? And then that's the stuff that you pull out later on. You could be on set and be like, hey, why don't we try this? And it's like a reference that I had seen 6 months earlier or whatever, because I was going down that rabbit hole. So on one side, it can be great. And, you build up that toolkit and that toolbox or whatever for references. But on the other side, you have to put a limit to it sometimes, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna close by saying what you just said. I think a lot of times we don't check things and reference them enough because that will lead you to what you're trying to find. I mean,
Right.
It's amazing how what was it 360 degrees it really is. Everything's connected. You could Google someone's T-shirt and it could lead you to exactly. 100%. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it'll lead you to something. You'd be like, oh my God, that's a thing, and you end up catching things ahead of time because, as far as I'm concerned, just speaking as a CEO myself, with you being a CEO, if we don't stay ahead of the game, we get behind really quickly. Because things are changing. And part of that is what you talk about, that referencing things and always Googling stuff and trying to stay connected. Would you agree to that? Because I've noticed it works for me.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's how you learn. And like you said, everything is connected. It is a small world sometimes, It's
amazing how small it really is, though.
Yeah.
And particularly in the CEO world, people that run their own businesses, it shrinks. You know what I mean?
Right.
Hey, thank you for your time, man. In closing, because if I didn't ask you this, they'd be upset with me. You're one of the great photographers out there, man. Get on all the great work. What's the one thing someone needs to own if they're trying to be as good a photographer as you are?
One thing they would need to be able to be good. Well, obviously a camera, right? Yeah. Is that too easy of an answer?
That's too easy. That one thing that they need, like you need to have this. Now, obviously, you got to have a camera, but be more specific in terms of that one thing that most great photographers ultimately end up with.
That's a good question. Maybe a library, I would say. Because I have a pretty extensive library of fashion and art and photography books. And so it's always good to pull out once in a while, even though you can quickly Google it, but there's something about a tangible book that you can flip through and see some of the greats. And, if I need some inspiration, sometimes that's what I'll pull out. And I know a lot of those older guys, the old masters, so to speak, they used to do the same. So I'll say library, build your library.
There you go. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Ryan West, the CEO of Ryan West Photos. If you want to reach him, you want to book him, hey, all the information is in the description, and we're excited to even get a chance to have him. Now, personal, investing, right? What stocks you looking at right now you think is a good buy right now?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot. I haven't. I haven't been on there like in a while.
Okay. All right. Okay. No problem.
I
thought you put a little money on something. I just want to know.
Nothing recently, but I do own during the initial dip from COVID or whatever, I did pick up a decent amount of VOO. It's just a nice safe one. You know what it is, right? S&P 500 from Vanguard pays a nice little dividend, and that has gone up. Where is it? VOO is just about 400. And I picked it up for I think like 265. So
that's excellent work right there, brother.
And it's just a nice safe, that's like the safety one. That's like, there's different, like I said, there's different styles, different techniques. That's one of them that I play. One of the other ones is what you taught me, which I haven't had a chance to do lately. But
you got to talk back with me now. I'm a little bit better than I was when I did that book. But the book is still the foundation of what I know now. But we'll talk because I definitely want to key you in on some new things that I've learned that really, it blows my mind. You literally get it right literally every week. Every week.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, y'all, Ryan West, we thank you for hanging out. Remember, in all you're doing, try to learn. If you're going to be a CEO, if you're going to try to run a company, if you listen to Ryan, you can see he's a learner. And if you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're dying.